Well, welcome back to the ITAM Kitchen, the place where we all have in that kitchen chat. We've always said, we kind of had the theme, it's like, you're in the kitchen, you're having a party or the folks at your house, things like that. And we're all around the kitchen island. You've been around those parties, I'm sure, those different activities, celebrations, whatever it is. And we're just chit-chatting. We're kind of doing that to a degree, but we're very structured. ITAM Kitchen literally is about being able to have that collaboration, going that next step, and see what we can cook up and see what we can talk about from that standpoint. And today, for those that don't know me, and there we go. If that's a Monday morning, trying to wake up kind of conversation. My name's Bill Talbot. I'm Mr. Bill, as we know in the ITAM industry. 30-year practitioner as far as hardware asset management, software asset management, configuration management, presenter, all that stuff. But it's also about me, and I also host the ITAM co-op, where we actually have the ITAM buddy. And it's a whole internal collaboration where we actually talk with fellow community members. And this is actually external facing to actually from the ITAM Kitchen to let you hear more about, okay, what are we talking about the industry, some different things that keep us up at night. But before I get started with all of the core topic here, let's let Deanna and Rob introduce themselves, and then we'll kick it right off. So Deanna, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Hi, I'm Deanna Hennigar, and I've been also working in the industry for a good 30 years, starting off with ITSM. Well, actually started off as a trainer, moved into ITSM, then moved into ITAM, and I just really like the ITAM space. So that's why we're going to discuss how disposing of your enterprise software and hardware, that we're going to focus on hardware today, is something you can't just throw out the door or ignore your vendor or your manufacturer.
I'm Rob Collins, and I've got 30 plus years of experience within IT and IT asset management. Call it proto-IT asset management activity just before it became formalized. I specialized within the standards and contributed to a lot of activity within like state government, for instance, and also some consulting in the private sector. Take it away.
Awesome. And from there, today is about disposal. How are we disposing things, as Deanna was just talking about? It's Deanna's passion, right? It's her passion. She loves disposal. And she's talked about that. If you've been on any of the sessions so far with all of us, it's about disposal, and how are you doing it from the front end. And today's the opportunity to hear a little bit more from Deanna on that front and that topic. So let's dig into it. We'll ask some questions along the way. Wherever you're contacting or reaching out to us from, whether it's on YouTube, it's actually a YouTube channel we're putting out there. Feel free to do a connection at ITAM Kitchen on YouTube or here within LinkedIn. I'm also streaming on LinkedIn for at least the rest of this month. It goes from there, but being able to make that happen is very important to all of us. So wherever you're coming from on the chat, feel free to say where you're contacting us from, and feel free to ask questions along the way because we're actively monitoring that within the system. So there, Deanna. So ITAD.
Sure.
We think about it. Okay, that disposal. How are you disposing it? We keep hearing these stories of things ending up in landfills or the security, et cetera. What's ITAD mean to you?
To me, ITAD is disposing of your assets in a proper way. There are a lot of, bad things inside of our computers. And if we don't dispose of them correctly, they can catch on fire. They can cause radioactive, depending on the gases. You have a lot of computer electronics in it, even though they don't seem to be alive. There are batteries in there. And landfills have a lot of methane. And batteries can explode the methane. I used to explain this when I was teaching in New York, that sometimes if you put one of those big old CRT monitors in a garbage truck, if it rattles around, because that has like a 50,000 capacitor charge in there, you could actually be sending a bomb down the street. Okay, so I lived in New York. They needed to have something that looked like very strong. So that's why I use that. If you throw something away, a piece of hardware, you have no idea how much memory even in a printer is. You're exposing your company to getting invaded. It's a backdoor problem. One of the other things is you don't know that you've disposed of it. The companies, including your software, the hardware company that you purchase it from, and the software companies are allowed to pretty much audit you. And the last thing you want to go through is a double hardware and software audit. They can prove that you did not take your Microsoft or Cisco information off of that item. You've exposed the companies as well. So there's a lot of concern. Also, life is different when you're in the enterprise systems, which is only 250 nodes, which is hardly a node is a computer or a server or some point of entry. And those nodes will expose everything if you don't dispose of the equipment correctly.
Potentially, yes.
These are all potentials.
This is mostly the data breach territory, for instance, that we're talking about with regard to the headlines. And you need go no further than just read the headlines occasionally, and we'll find out.
No.
It's reputational damage is one of the greatest risks of something as simple as just lackadaisical disposal process.
So basically, ITAD is protecting the company from exposure. I will talk a little bit about your ITAD disposal company in a little bit. But what I've seen in industry, when your ITAD's not working correctly, that means you don't have a handle on what your assets are. And if you don't have a handle on what your assets are, you can't retire it correctly. Because you need to, your data wipes, you need to do a destruction. If you don't sell it properly and keep the proper records and have a certificate of sales, that's another way your company, because enterprise is entirely different than a mom and pop shop.
Absolutely. Now, with our audience, keep in mind we have audiences of all sizes, small, medium, large, right? So if you have a small organization, you were just talking about mom and pop shop, right? Mom and pop. How would you put your frame of mind in place to say, okay, I still need to worry about this, because you might only have 5 or 10 people or maybe 100. So it's not very large versus, I say, the larger organizations like hundreds or thousands of employees or even thousands of employees from that standpoint, because there's a different mindset that comes in place. But a lot of your disposal pieces you're talking about are also very critical on both ends, both sizes, all sizes of the organization. So how would you start with this? Let's start small. What comes to mind? And I'm going to take some notes when we do it. What comes to mind that we need to make sure that we have covered within the small environment?
Even still, you need to know all of your asset, your tags. You still have to be able to monitor and find out if you own them. A lot of people, if they do not put their procurement in correctly or their identity management in correctly, you not necessarily can retire a product, because the CMDB, or the configuration management database, is your electronic record of what you own when it is in use. And that's a particular topic I like you to understand. If it's not in use, it's in stock and it's sitting on your shelf. Once an item is in use, it goes over to the CMDB. When you purchase a record, you may get a older record in the CMDB, but you're not tracking it yet. Once you start tracking your items, you now know what you own. If it's not in the AMDB, if you go to retire it, it's not going to find the physical record, and the electronic record kind of goes, oh, I can't find it. So start making a whole bunch of CMDB records to try to retire something that it doesn't own. And then it just stops, and it will still clog up your CMDB, still in the configuration management.
Well, what about if the customer, this user, this group says, I don't even have an AMDB. I barely have a CMDB. I know I have this list of assets. It's in the spreadsheet. You want to go down that path because they haven't even matured that far in their within the organization yet.
Now that we've moved on to the enterprise, the law is we don't accept Excel files any longer. It can tell you what your physical assets are, but it's not going to show how you're tracking them. And that's the important part of the CMDB. It's tracking your items. Some corporations will say, well, I don't have to track an item if it's under $1,000. I've said this before. Mom and pops don't really have that difficulty, but you really shouldn't take something that you've been using in your industry and hand it to your child. I have seen that before. Yes.
Me too.
Okay. And I don't know, I just kind of cringe. I just even me, I have a lot of my old equipment because I haven't erased it properly. I haven't taken off of my identity yet. So you find a lot of us old techie people have a whole lot of techie stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. Myself included. Oh, absolutely. And keep in mind on the regulatory requirements, right? So you still may have individuals in the smaller organizations that are still using spreadsheets, right? So what's a convincing point? Because you just said, okay, some of the regulatory requirements are now to be put on the database. What's a convincing point to say, okay, it's time to move forward to be able to track that? I don't want to get off the disposal topic, but I think you have a very critical point here, right?
It's related.
It's related because a smaller company may not understand HIPAA. And HIPAA is, so if you have a small organization that does some nursing programs or that has information of patients' information or even of individuals' information, you have to be very careful. It must be wiped because if that computer is found disposed or outside, they will go inside and see what data are in it. And if that data contains personal information for any person, that's a breach. Even if they're under 250 nodes in that company. That is, no, and then we have the GDPR in Germany, no, in the EU. And in the EU, they are very locking down. They are more stringent than we are here. And in that strictness,
big time.
Now, if one of those computers ended up across the pond, we are in deeper trouble because it contains personal information. And some of that is just a social security number, your age, your health situation. Those are all items that are protected by governments. From the beginning, they weren't that. They were more interested in the Sarbanes-Oxley corroboration than they were about the information going out. Now we have to worry about the information that's on these systems.
There's a specific risk around that. Sarbanes-Oxley, that you were just Sarbanes-Oxley that you were just talking about. The risk there with spreadsheets is that any person, for instance, that has access to a spreadsheet can modify and approve the data, right? There isn't an actual audit trail present. And so that separation of duties, right, is what's violated in the case of that usage.
Yeah. Keep going.
Yep.
And that's a fundamental of accounting.
Yes. We can't audit what we don't know we have, though we can still get in trouble if someone else finds it.
Yep.
Absolutely. And that's a good point. I just wanted to go down that part because I think a lot of spreadsheets are still being used today, right? That's the original, we always call the spreadsheets the original database, or be able to track data. And if it's regulatory, you need to make sure within your space that you're able to continue using the spreadsheets, or you do have a compliance problem happening there, whether it's medical or otherwise. There's something to be said, irrelevant the size. And that's where I wanted to drive that home. But also with small environments, right? So I think you brought up a good point. You may have a small, was a nursing home. You got a small business, right? 50 to 100 PCs or systems in it on that side, right? So you still have something small. They're doing their day-to-day activities. They're going to say, okay, I'm starting to track. I need to track on the disposal. What's also being able to say, okay, what else do they need to be looking at? Because how you look at small environments can be a little bit different than how you look at, say, a 300,000 person company, right? The systems and the auditing, et cetera. There's a lot of similarities, but you're still going to have some differences because it's going to be done by one person with multiple hats, typically, as an example, right?
Yeah. Well, sometimes in a small environment, they don't know to care.
Yeah.
And They may not realize that any printer image or email that comes in through the printer, those images now stay on a hard drive on those printers because they're called smart printers nowadays. We even had a key card that a small company wouldn't have that you can't print until you put your card to the printer, and you will only get your files that have been placed in the spooler on the printer. And
Absolutely.
this haven't died just because you took off the power. And a smaller company may not understand that those images that they've been passing back and forth are still on that printer.
Yeah, they're in the hard drive.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. And kind of where we were going also is from the regulatory perspective, just making sure you come back to that, because it is important to know some of the standards that we're talking about around the size. And size doesn't matter in this case, right? That's the best way to put that.
Information matters at this point.
Scale.
Data, yeah. That's right, it's data. May not be information, it's data. Data becomes information. We actually have a path for these words now.
Let's see.
I'm watching the chat messages. Anybody attending, please put your location, for instance, and just tell us something like how.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's about being collaborative across the board. So as we move forward here, right? So the small organization, what else comes to mind? Not just from small, but just from a disposal perspective, because you know more of the generalities now. Is what comes to mind when it's disposal? That are some of the problems you're seeing today when it comes to disposal as a whole. I mean, we hear things in the press. Okay, fine. I mean, there was one just recently in DC area over the last year. We heard there was how they were disposing of computers and somebody was selling it off, or you hear about different activities where maybe somebody was supporting systems or procuring new systems and they were going back out the door and selling right back out. You hear those type of activities. But Deanna, you've had a lot of experience inside different organizations. What are some of the key points that we want to make sure our users understand that they need to be aware of, to actually, as well as some of the executives, right, to need to be aware of when it comes to disposal that still need to be addressed, that may not be documented or regulatory as such, but it's just happenstance, and it's like, by the way, X, Y, and Z, because there's always those hidden gems. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So when items say arrive at the shipping dock or receiving dock, and the personnel do not enter the data into the asset repository, they don't know they own it. I have found a couple of companies where that if they don't add their assets, they don't think they own them. But it trails back to first purchaser. So if you do find something that your company doesn't remember purchasing, or did purchase, and your employees do not put the information on the books, I have known that a few things have walked out the door if they are found. Well, I don't have any record of it. Well, we can go back to procurement. We can go back to Lenovo or HP, and we give them the serial number, and they will tell us the first purchaser of that item. And that first purchaser of the item has full responsibility, even though it walked out the door before it was recorded. Sometimes computers can make someone else a whole lot of money selling them outside of your business.
Mm-hmm. And value recovery is a really good point too. With yours, you can recover some value from it after it met at the end of its useful life.
Right.
Yep.
The one example I have of that is one company kept just sending their disposals and not finding out if there's any real value in them. And I'll use the example again of iPads. iPads are only going to get you maybe $10 from your disposal company. They say the disposal, they'll send you back a certificate of erasure. And if they send you back the certificate of erasure and you accept that, and it's used later on because it was poorly disposed, you still owe the cleaning up of a landfill. What if it ended up in someone's case and it, I don't know, but some of the laptops and batteries used to burn out or burn up? You're responsible for people's lives if something like that should happen. So my whole concept is we don't want to hurt anybody. We want to know what we have. And if it was walked out the door before it was recorded in the database, we think no, we don't know. You can't be blind to these. And when you buy them, even as individual, if I just accidentally put some of my own equipment in the trash and it was found in a landfill, they can come back to me personally as well. The second thing to that, if you do have a really good ITAD system, that iPad, if you sold it either back to Apple or sold it to your disposal company, can get you a whole lot of money. One example, you could just dispose of your iPads and they'll give you a few dollars. A large disposal may bring you back $3,000. But if you sold them, you may get back $39,000 because you sold them instead. So that's one of the reasons why I would ask a company, don't buy end-of-life equipment as new. Yeah. I've seen that happen as well. If you buy end-of-life equipment, there's no what they call the this kind of business, meat on the bone. If I have no meat on the bone, then I can only do straight disposals. If I can resell or do a wipe and then donate, if I donate, it makes the company look good because then some child who didn't have a computer, at least have a computer. We still have to wipe it. We still have to put in a new hard drive. Especially in enterprise, we have to destroy, make sure the hard drive was destroyed. So we may not need a certificate of destruction on the full computer, but we need to have a certificate of destruction for the hard drive. So we sold the computer, but we had to destroy the hard drive. Well, some companies, I don't want to get back down into the nitty gritty of having to record all the assets of the hard drives. Well, guess what? You do. If you're going to sell them or dispose of them and that hard drive is not destroyed, sometimes a certificate of erasure is not good enough because even though the information, the data were erased, it doesn't necessarily mean it's off that hard drive. There are a lot of unscrupulous people out there who can read through a wipe nowadays. Unless you literally do an electronic destruction. We did this once in school. She was military, and she had the military wipe software. And instead of saying, just remove the data, she did a full wipe, and it does destroy your hard drive. You can't use it again. So we were glad we learned that in school.
Yeah, the standard actually describes the destruction as it has to be adequate, the data is no longer retrievable or recoverable, and that includes through forensic means. Keep that point in mind.
You may not have to go through all forensics depending on what they're sending out, but the government, no. Much different standards.
That's 888.
Yep.
And it was just updated last year.
And I couldn't find it. The last update I could find on the internet was 2004.
Oh, I can get it if you need it.
Yes.
Yeah,
sometimes you need to have access to these certain governing bodies, and those access to some of these governing bodies are not cheap. But if you're in that industry, it costs you more money than to pay the money. And it's well worth making sure you get it done correctly.
Yep. Your method will meet the standards. That will get you through. That's the reason for the certifications for the ITAD vendors that do this. They put that up front. They let you know.
That's right.
Yeah. R3 is one of the certifications.
Yes, R2V3 right now.
R2V3. Okay.
responsible recycling is R2, and they're up to the B3 standard.
Yeah.
And those are called like downstream vendor due diligence, which ensures that your recycling partners do follow standards. You have to make sure your data is sanitized and destructive. You can't just, oh no, I ran a degauser on it. The degauser is a large magnet, or a very powerful magnet, doesn't have to be large, a very powerful magnet that takes all the little ones and zeros and scrambles them. The data still are out there. Okay.
Physically, if you look at it, it's just you're passing it through a really strong magnetic field. So it's taking everything on the drive and aligning it according to those lines of magnetic force.
Yeah.
For those physicists out there, that's how that works.
Yeah, I can come together.
And keep in mind, when it comes to ITAD, ITAD is not a sexy topic, right? It's not from that standpoint, but it's actually a very, I'll say, a therapeutic topic. And what I mean by that, and why I use that word, is because when it comes to thinking about disposal or anything that Deanna's mentioned, Rob's mentioned so far, when you start thinking about the holistic view of it, you actually go through the entire asset life cycle to make sure it's being tracked, right? And so that's what I mean by therapeutic. It's another one of those check and balances, making sure that you're performing it correctly, the rest of the team's on board. I put stakeholder awareness. Your stakeholders are aware of it and what's happening. Maybe that's something you also need to put within some of the policy documents. That's something else that comes to mind, right? Because when you talk about disposal, typically, if you look at the employee handbook, when they talk about how you handle electronics, disposal is nowhere to be found in there, right? But the reality is we need to start thinking about that, injecting that little message to say, do not dispose of things. Let IT deal with that technology, right? Whatever it is in the data. Sometimes it's inferred, right? It's inferred it's going to occur, but it's not direct. You need to be much more direct in this case, because if you're not direct in this, if you're going to be in the press, they'll be a little bit more direct. Something needs to change, right? Yeah. I just use that as an example. So wherever you guys want to take that or not take it, go for it. That's just what came to mind for me.
Curtis Paul mentioned something in the comments. He's put the statement solid state drives in there too, so that you understand that you're working with all kinds of different storage technologies. The 888 actually gives you a matrix, if you will, decision making that sort of tells you what kind of data you have on board and what sort of destruction methods are appropriate to those devices.
And I'm finding that people who only work in the CMDB, the configuration management database, don't necessarily understand the hardware. They only understand tracking. If something is no longer in the CMDB and we haven't retired it, where did it go? Is it on our shelf? Can we go back to the asset management database? Can we go back to a spreadsheet? Those items can't tell us where it went to some point. I do know that when an asset gets in, you have to set your location. You have to make sure that you have the serial number. The 3 items you need to track an asset. The serial number, the manufacturer, make, and model. And with some companies do not do the asset tag. And a lot of disposal companies I've seen, they'll give you a list of your asset tags because they will scrape the asset tag off the hardware. It may not be able to read the BIOS, may not be able to get you the serial number. You still own that item even if they can't match it if it's found, because the government has other ways of finding what's on your hard drive or in your BIOS or in your... Yes, we're talking about contract hardware disposal services. But still, if you don't know where your asset is, you're still bound by the contract, and you may not know where it's at. It's still your item.
Absolutely. List out those attributes you were talking about one more time. You were talking about serial number.
Yep, serial number.
Yeah.
Now that is usually etched on the outside or somewhere on the body of the item. A
Sure.
lot of times it could also be in the BIOS, hard coded in the BIOS.
Yes.
Some vendors will, when you have them do your asset for you, because you don't mind paying the extra $5 per asset,
Exactly.
they will actually assign an asset tag to the BIOS, and it'll also make sure it has the manufacturer,
It is.
make, and model.
It's in the
So,
baseboard.
yep.
You can
And it also
have-
depends on the type of system you work with too. So sometimes you don't have a serial number because it's going by MAC address or something like that. It just depends
Correct.
on the type of
Right.
device. So you've got to look at that uniqueness, and that's how I'll just have a little contribute. But
Absolutely.
what are the additional attributes we want to
Make,
make sure we're
make and
capturing?
model. So make would be the manufacturer itself, and the model,
model.
and then the model is the model assigned by the manufacturer. All right, so I have a Kia car, which is the manufacturer, but my model is a Soul. Okay, so you could have an HP, and then its model number would be like a 15 FD012DX. And sometimes the model will relate back and tell you what the hardware components are.
Typically.
Now, one of the major problems I've seen with recording of these into the asset management system is they'll put down HP, fine, but then in the model they'll actually put HP in the full number. So your model looks like HP blah 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 blah.
It's an HP laptop. What's the difference?
Yeah, the components inside, the amount
Exactly.
of power. Okay. Do you have an SSD or do you have a regular hard drive?
No, absolutely. And this is where data quality makes
Yep.
difference, right? You want to make sure that's where we're coming to, is you need to confirm, you need to validate the data, the quality of your data, right?
So if they
I might
can't,
not be able to say it, but that's where you're supposed to be doing. Okay.
so if they can't find the serial number, they'll give you the asset tag on a piece of paper saying, we destroyed this or we erased from here. Says, now if you can't match the asset tag back to the serial number, even though you disposed of it, you still own it because you don't know how to match back to the serial number, make, and model. That's why we need those 3 separate areas for recording.
Yep. Exactly.
And then there's another area in your asset base, which is called your features. Do not put your features in the name of the equipment, because then you can't do a normalization.
Keep the name simple. There'll be enough detail throughout the rest of the record that you could obtain by a variety of different means.
Yes.
No need to clog up a field with that. You can always use notes or comments or feature sets or some other field if you really got to get down into the weeds on it. But that can change with configuration. So don't be so married to that record entirely. You have to have it. And at one level, and in the many discussions we've had, asset management database versus configuration management database, this is something to really think about seriously. Most tools can accommodate their CMDB without a problem, but not so much so with the asset management. That's typically not built in as often to the tools as I would like to see them done. But uniformly in our profession, this is what we encounter.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you may also, within your environment, it just depends upon your manufacturer. You may actually have additional fields you need to capture here. I was just using these as an example, right? You need to review these for your own environment because it depends answer, right? It's the typical, because if you're saying you're doing Dell, you're doing great with this, right? So you have that, make it happen. If you're doing IBM, you may need additional attribute. Right? I can't remember what it was. There's an additional field just because it's IBM. It's the best way to put it. Because the model number might be identical, but it's a different type or something like that. I think it's a type, is the additional field. It distinguishes where it's AS400 or PC or whatever, right? They actually do reuse models as an example. HP is usually pretty good. You keep it pretty clean like this. You have different varieties. But again, it depends upon what you're tracking. If you're doing, say, the ASUS or something like that, totally different animal, you probably keep fun with like this. It just depends on your environment, when you're in corporate, local, whatever it is. And if you're doing BYOD or something like that, you just add a whole nother level of complexity on that. And that's what I like to put in on some of this. We talk about like OT, IoT, BYOD when it comes to disposal. Let's dig into that a little bit, because we're on the last half hour of our chat, which I love. This is great. We're having a great dialogue. What else comes to mind when we start talking about, okay, these additional things that we need to start incorporating when we talk about disposal? Deanna?
One of the other things is that we have a system where that we have a lot of people who touch our equipment before it rests where it belongs, and we call that IMAC. Okay, when it's implemented, did the tech put it from in stock to in use? Did he change the location from stock room to where the person actually resides? There are so many things that our people touch that we kind of ignore. And then when you move it, did you move it to the right place?
Yeah.
Did you track the move?
Could we explain to the audience exactly what IMAC stands for?
Sure. IMAC is implementation,
Yep.
move, add, and changes. So implementation is first. Move is when you go between person to person or location to location.
Yep.
Addition is when you say you needed an extra hard drive, or you needed to have more memory put in, or additions. Changes are full. We went from one type to a different type. And then I actually add the D to the end of it for disposal. So I go IMAC D, because did my person correctly say it's no longer in use, it's no longer going to be fixed, so we're putting it disposal. Those are all human changes, which is why we need training. Sorry.
On IMAC, for just a moment, a couple of things to kind of take note of that is IMAC typically is within an operational lifecycle. I put the box here today and I'm assigning it to a user. But that box, if powerful enough, could in its next iteration it's going to be a server box over here, and it's just going to handle routine tasks. And then at some point, you might take that same box and say, all right, so in a third iteration of operation, it's going to be, let's say, a library or a data repository. Those things can happen often in the operational life cycle. So it's important to take note of those things. I think it's a tie into the change management aspect of your service.
Absolutely.
So that's your actual data link that you can use if you're a data nerd like everybody on this call. You can have somebody go through and pull a history of everything we ever did with this box. Because the unifying information in the baseboard, in the BIOS, is that thing. It's this serial number no matter what, right? And it's this make, model, and manufacturer no matter what you do with it. And so I wanted to just kind of highlight just those two aspects of this, and then we'll go back to the main topic.
One of the things I do like about history is history can help you with incident management and problem management.
Yep. That's
when we first got I'm only going to use this as an example, a group of HPs, and I kept listening going, wow, that person had that problem, that person had that problem. We had a whole batch of bad computers. And if you do not go take the time to go through the history to see how many of these have had the same problem, you're stuck with the problem and you can't go back to the manufacturer because you've accepted the problem as your own. So if you go through the history and you go, hey, I have 20 this week, 10 last week, and 5 the week before, this is a growing problem. Mm-hmm. You need to isolate that, because if you don't send incidences to problem management, you'll never track down the root cause. And if you don't track down the root cause, you can't do your change management. So that's why understanding operations is helpful to disposal purposes.
Absolutely.
And so Curtis has something up here. So I like the
which one are you looking at?
The big one that came up.
Okay, let's go right there. Okay. There's also a difference between model number and retail model number. That can be different, absolutely. So if somebody's manually compiling a list, reclaimed hardware, some people may record the actual number, model number, et cetera. And this is a great point, is when you're tracking this, make sure you have specific procedures on how to track it, where to track it, and where to get that information. And that's actually in the receiving as well as during the disposal process. It's very important you have those attributes identified. We gave a few here. Trust me, I could throw location in here. I could throw user in here. I could throw department in here. I could throw contract in here. You keep going, right? And because to me, they're extremely critical. Not saying you're not foundationally going here as the example in the attributes, but that's a very good point as far as when you look at the data. When you become the data nerd, which we all try, we'll say we're certified data nerds. Just look at how much time we've spent spreadsheet data. Yeah, that it will absolutely happen. And you're gonna say, what in the world? And that's a good thing. If you're questioning it, that's awesome, because you need to be questioning. So congratulations, you just coming into the data nerd world. So welcome to the family. We'll put it that way.
You got your attention. Yeah, that's important. I like this one too. Curtis mentioned or questions. Hey, what methods of validating lifecycle state? Well, I'll tell you, pinging is the first, because that means it's on, it's plugged in, and it's on your network. So it's in the operational lifecycle right there. And then if you're doing polling of that device through discovery or through any means that you choose, right, then you'll be able to figure out where it's at. Another way, for instance, to say that if you've got your IT folks reclaiming those items so they can be done for disposition, then go check the current state and inventory of your storeroom. What's the term used? I think it's storeroom. Stockroom. So there's another place there where you can do that. And I think it's important. Curtis makes a really good point about understanding what the life cycle is for all products and all of those different processes that you use to collect data, update data, make changes, ticketing systems, etc. So have that in mind, and you can find metrics and you can find the procedures to do this validation, capture KPIs.
Yeah, and let me put a little clarity on that one. Also, if you guys are out there, from an asset management perspective, we've got status. Courtesy of service now, I will go ahead and call them out. They actually, within theirs, they're going to call it states versus status, because they, within their configuration management, they put a status over there, so they use a different field and attribute name. So I just want to make sure I call that out, because it does vary depend upon the organization or the tool you're using. But yeah, stop inventory. You also do discovery. Your discovery data.
One of the things I wanted to say is that don't necessarily rely on discovery data for laptops, because discoveries usually run 2 o'clock in the morning, and most people are asleep at 2 o'clock in the morning and do not have their laptops on the network.
Embed things like on boot, on login, and several other events throughout the day at shutdown. Or if you have an agent on board, it's a lot easier, but like InfoSec cries about the activity on the network, you can negotiate that. Or there are agentless discoveries that do similar things. In my experience, in my experience, I actually set that up so that I would have them tell us where they are, who they're working with, what's on them, etc. Nice modules that we would get back on.
Not only log in, but not only turn on, but who is the last user to log in.
Yep.
That's important, because then you can find out if somebody else is borrowing someone else's laptop or computer.
And most of the time, one of the problem areas that ITAM managers and that IT managers have is we don't know the owner. We don't have a consistent assignment process across the board.
Right.
So when you can grab that information, then you can get an idea. Was it a tech that was working on this a lot? Is it a problematic box? Or is this doing its role and everybody's happy with this box? So you always get a consistent end user. And you can tie that stuff back, and you can run subqueries and things to assist with that work. So
Curtis is actually agreeing with us that you have to have reliable monitoring agents. The network discovery pretty much is your. I can find my server. I can walk into a room and there's this big server sitting in there. And to Rob's point, yes, we can take a laptop, make it into a server, and bring it back to a laptop, depending on the operating system. Or the strength of the computer, the components of the computer.
And this also goes back to the point that at this point, when you start doing this, I mean, we start with disposal, we're still in disposal, right? But validating this, you're actually looking at the entire life cycle. And that's where some of the different points I looked at, whether it's the stock room, your discovery, your procurement. I even put the death certificate on that, right? So your current status. You may have additional feeds that are coming through for all sorts of different information. Being able to reconcile that to say, it's out of here. Because sometimes what happens, and this is where having a very tight process of how you do your install, move, add, change, specifically in your change and ads, is if you have a motherboard that goes bad, it's under warranty, right? And you have one of the vendors that come in and actually change the equipment in your office. Doesn't happen as much as frequent as it used to, but it still does. And put another motherboard in it, didn't put the serial number on it, right? It's still on the box itself, or maybe it's a different serial number from another system because I brought it back. You have to pay attention to what these configurations are. And I say that from an experience being a baseline inventory manager. That's painful. It's the best way to put it. You find things like it's painful, but those are the questions and those anomalies you have to look for. I'm just using this as an example. So it goes back to you look at the life cycle of your asset, no matter what.
You see.
So perfect. Okay, so as we go through this, I was talking a little bit. We were talking for a second, and you're right. Curtis was talking about data centers, office desktop, very different. Absolutely, especially you want to talk SaaS. We're talking about insanity, and I mean we're only talking about hardware. There's a reason why, because you start going SaaS, virtual environments, et cetera. You want to talk about going insane if you don't pay attention to it too much. Under your uniqueness, yes, and that's a data nerd talking, right? But before we get out of time, because oh my gosh, the last 10 minutes we saw great. Let's talk about BYOD, or let's talk about OT type devices. How do we need to start incorporating these? Actually, we should already be doing this, by the way, right? But how we will make sure those are incorporated with everything we're talking about right here, because for us in asset management, it's kind of a new thing for us because this is where we kind of accepted, okay, different groups doing a different thing from manufacturing, let it be, don't pay attention to, but because of regulatory requirements and actually security risks, et cetera, they are coming into the fold that they're our brethren. So what do we need to make sure we keep in mind for disposal when it comes to these type of devices?
I've heard with the BYOD, bring your own device, that the company has the right to, when you no longer with the company, to destroy your hard drive. You have to get or hopefully replace your hard drive. Okay.
Does that go for phones as well?
Yes, it does, because
okay.
Because your phone is now tied to the company. You have to make sure that all of that information is off. Luckily, I did have a BYOD, but they didn't do that for me with my phone for some reason. I guess because of the identity management or what we used.
Yeah,
out of the company.
That's an area of how would you say, of a little conflict there, because it is your device.
Yep.
And most of the data on it is yours.
Yep.
So you're going to have to get a good workflow going between you and the data people at the company to ensure that, yes, their data is off of your device completely. It doesn't necessarily entitle them to destroy your device.
But you have to sign a piece of paper saying that you're going to do that.
Well, in addition, typically for installing software on your device, or whether it's mobile or otherwise, that they are going to be maintaining and managing and looking at all the data on that device. Yeah. So you want to keep that in mind as well. So I just want to make sure I put that little nugget in there, because some people don't pay attention. Yeah, I'll check box it, but realize they're looking at everything of yours. Yeah.
Yep.
Some have good processes for taking their corporate stuff off of your devices, and I've gone through that, and I was actually pleased with the result. My device was left basically completely usable and unharmed in any way whatsoever.
Correct. Absolutely.
They were protected as well.
Well, mine's more about the what ifs, and that going down the worst case scenario, right? And that's kind of where I was going. A little more dramatic on, I guess, on that side. You do need to be careful of and pay attention to, because that awareness, people just, okay, it's someone else's problem. Yeah, I have the data on there, not paying attention to it. And I'm not saying you don't have a reputable company you're working for. I'm not saying at all. But they do have that right, if they feel the need, that they can interrogate that system that much more, because you've given them permission to manage that device, including locking you out of seeing anything in it, which means all your contacts, your phone numbers, etc.
Your baby pictures.
It's a risk.
Pictures included, yeah.
The easiest way is just don't accept, don't use BYOD, even though it's convenient for you. And instead say, I'd just rather have a company device, and I will keep it separated. Should anything ever happen, all you need to do is just hand that device back.
Yeah. And you do have the scenario. I had this scenario at the last company I worked for. They said, okay, well, we're going to install software in a device. Okay. It's like, no. I go, what do you mean? It's like, no, it's not going to be. You can have it. You can install a different phone. In this case, it was about phones, right? It's like, you can have a phone because they're going to manage the data, everything on it, pictures, whatever. So if you're going to do that, you give me a device. And they say, well, you have to pay for the device. It's an interesting scenario, right? Yeah, it's an interesting scenario. And so it's like, okay, but it's a very inexpensive cost. I'll put it that way. But it was a totally different device. So I was carrying 2 devices everywhere I went, irrelevant where I was around the globe. Drove me a little batty at times, but there you go. You have to figure out how far you're going to take that and think this through as a person. Again, we just kind of went out of the corporate world into the person side, but that's where you have to pay attention, because we went BYOD. It's extremely important for you to think this through on how you want to work with it, because it's also, if they say it's BYOD or nothing, tell them, and they're going to totally control your systems. I know what my personal opinion is, and I'll leave that to me, right? You have to come up with your own personal opinion how you're going to address scenarios like that, and take it pretty critical. Okay, so absolutely, device data, still managing, very similar. What about tracking of BYOD devices? What comes to mind?
No, well, I can tell you, because I've worked in an environment where I didn't necessarily set the policy, but I did have to account for the items, the assets. And so there was that. And I would just do check-ins with the user occasionally to ensure that, yes, you still are actively using this device. Mainly because it was tied to other services, like the little Wi-Fi devices and internet extenders from way back in the 90s and the 2000s. So for me, a user, represented the holding of, let's say, a PC, a laptop, a cell phone, and then a Wi-Fi device, for instance, that goes along with that. Their whole kit. Matter of fact, really cool. I actually set us up for the Gulf oil spill and had a standard suite of items that every time we were going to send a representative out to a county, they got this package of items. This is goes with them. When they return from duty, then that package of items is immediately collected, retrieved, and made ready for the next user. And we always get 4 or 5 items. So that kind of falls into that as well.
Absolutely. But my point was, from a tracking perspective, because we talked about the life cycle, the tracking, et cetera. When you bring BYOD in the picture, you have to track that as well. It's not saying, yes, it's a user's device, but because you decided that you're going to incorporate that into your organization, you need to track and manage that to who the user is, location, where it sits, et cetera. Very similarly, that's what I was going to bring. And sometimes you don't know what type of device you're going to bring in, or you need to put a standard around what type of device you want to bring brought in from that side, from that standpoint. So in the last 5 minutes, it's great going down this part. When we think about this, we're talking about disposal. What are the things that, let's say, from a success, we've talked about disposal. We usually go, okay, what's the drama? Where are we bringing it in? But what's your overall success at the end of the day you're looking for from your disposal, all this disposal effort? Because I think that value is actually kind of being lost, right? You have disposal vendors. Okay, we'll take the assets, et cetera. Great. I don't have to worry about someone else's issue, et cetera. But let's come to some final value statements for everyone to leverage when they talk about disposal, if they need to incorporate this more inside their enterprise.
One of the things that comes to mind, is financial. Financial, because you can now take the item off your fixed records and no longer pay government fines or pay your government. Because a lot of people don't realize your fixed assets, it's just like your lighting or your building. You owe taxes on fixed items. And you have to prove that it's no longer in use or no longer owned.
Yeah. It also reduces the load of security vulnerabilities for those devices. As soon as you indeed have certified that they are yea verily destroyed, if this document represents that destruction, then in addition to falling off of the books as being discussed, you also have that elimination of another vector for your information security, cybersecurity.
Got it. Excellent. Well, I think you talked about value, sometimes resell, right? So you're able to get some additional money, right?
Value recovery.
Recovery, yeah.
Yep. Value recovery.
And we're only talking about hardware. We're not even going down to software. I'd love to have a whole discussion about hardware.
That'd be
It would be week long.
We need to have it another time. I'd love to have that discussion too, because it also depends by country on that one. Recovery, I think it's just being able, what we talked about, it actually helps monitor the entire process when you talk about disposal, right? You have, it's not overarching, but it's providing that additional monitor, check and balance, that you're check and balance, which we've been talking about, the check and balance to your iMac, right?
It also caps the total cost of ownership for the given asset, and that gets tallied up. This, by the way, is an asset. It's a digital pen. And this is the kind of, something as simple as this also falls into your data destruction standards.
It does. It does.
So there's memory associated with it. Yeah.
I'll say process checkpoint. Keep going.
But with recovery, some of your ITADs will literally pay you for the metal and the items that are inside.
Yep.
Because they
Resource recovery.
resource recovery, yeah.
Materials, yeah. There's gold in them computers.
Yes, there is.
Well, so I'm curious. When it comes to the recovery, let's go back to the recovery. We talk about the recovery, talk about the employee policies, things like that, right? That also have an ITAD process in place, or just ITAD, I won't say the process, but overarching part of the program. Will that also improve your recovery? Potential recovery versus, say you have a 50% miss today. And I've worked with organizations, large organizations, name, and we know who they are. I won't say the name, that are literally, they lose half their assets every year.
Do they have any kind of process that incentivizes the return of those devices? Because that will improve the recovery rate of those devices.
So mine is you talk to HR, and when they leave the company, if they've not returned their devices, the final cost of the devices are removed from their final paycheck. It's hard to get that one through, but I've been to companies who've been like that. If you don't get this back, you subtract from your paycheck.
If there's some additional financial payment that's due, for instance, outside of regular pay, often I've seen where that's been used.
No, that's great. That's great. Well, we're at the top of the hour, but I just want to make sure we hit some of these value points in the end, because I think it's extremely important. And you can go multiple different layers as far as these value points in addition. But as we talked about, we found another topic we're going to talk about at some point in ITAM Kitchen. We'll figure out where, but it's talking about the software piece in ITAD, because and that's a very critical juncture, and also change management, configuration. It all comes into play, how it comes together. It drives me. I could see multi-session on that. Oh my God, my brain just went nuts. You probably see it coming out of my ears on a Monday morning. But with that, as we wrap up, because we're a little bit over, go figure, right? Here, 30-second wrap up there, Deanna.
Sure. You really have to pay attention to your hardware, because then when we get into the discussion of software, it's a bigger ball of wax. That's my
That's cool. That's cool. Rob, any additional comments you want to add to that?
Yeah, really the big one to take away from this for ITAD professionals and for ITAM professionals trying to sell this, the value points are going to be key to convincing anybody, leadership, CXOs, that doing an ITAD program is a good investment. And it really does protect your company and cover lots of risks. It's much more than just hitting the thing with a hammer.
Yes.
And there's much more at risk than merely having just the data itself being compromised. So much more. And I think that this is a great session that kind of highlighted all of that.
No, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you guys contributing. This has been great. Been a great session on several different angles. Great. My name is Bill, Mr. Bill, as we know, and that's going to wrap it up for today. Tomorrow, we're going to continue on that treasure map and talk more about the role. We're talking about value points. We're going to talk more about some of the storyboards and some of the value points tomorrow, and some of the parts of that role, how it further evolves. And value provides multiple different angles. So more to come on that. And on Wednesday, Rob, you're on point on Wednesday, right? If I remember right.
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, we're going to put, and we're talking about the resumes, and you actually submit a resume, what to expect in formatting within there on today's systems that honestly drive you a little batty is the best way to put it. The impersonal touch. And we're going to talk about more about that. Yeah, but it's going to be a very active week as always. And I appreciate you being here. And we're going to wrap it up for today. I will see you again tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Bye.
Thanks all. Bye.
Okay.
Good.